Hello everyone and welcome to this session. So today SNAP 2025 exam was conducted across India and today we are going to present an analysis of the same with you. Now this particular examination, SNAP 2025 exam, this exam is conducted on multiple days. So 3 different dates have been set aside and the SNAP authorities allow students to write this exam multiple times. And if you choose to write this exam multiple times, then best of your performances will be taken into account when they decide your percentile. So there's no harm in writing this exam multiple times. Now, as far as SNAP 25 exam is concerned, this particular exam had 60 questions in it, and it was 1 hour duration of examination. And SNAP allows you to utilize that 1 hour duration the way you want to. That means there were no sectional time limits in place. As far as marking scheme goes, 0.25 marks were deducted for every wrong answer. That means in this particular exam, it is advisable for you to be a little careful while marking your answers. Because there is negative marking involved, you may end up losing precious marks. So it was advisable for the students to be a little cautious when attempting the questions. Now, let's have a look at the pattern of the examination to begin with. And based on the feedback that we have got from numerous students, the examination has been conducted very smoothly and nobody has reported any kind of technical glitches. So to that part, we definitely need to give credit to Symbiosis International University. They have done a very good job in conducting SNAP examination today. Now, as far as pattern of the exam goes, just as it was in the last few years, the pattern remained the same. 60 questions were there overall. So 60 questions that you needed to complete within 60 minutes. And the total marks were also 60. Every question accounts for 1 mark. And as I said earlier, there is a provision of negative marking. 0.25% marks would be deducted for every wrong answer. So it makes sense to be a little more cautious while attempting the questions. And because there are no sectional time limits in place, the student has a freedom, the test taker has a freedom to utilize that 1 hour duration the way he or she wants to. And remember, SNAP examination usually doesn't have any sectional cutoffs. Because there are no sectional cutoffs, you can try to maximize your overall score. It definitely makes sense to spend more time with your stronger areas and a slightly less amount of time with your weaker areas. That's how SNAP exam is designed. So this was about the examination. Now, let's begin by looking at each of the sections one by one. But before I do that, let me also make one thing very clear right at the onset. In terms of difficulty level, based on the feedback that we have received, the difficulty level of the examination overall has slightly moved down. That means it has become slightly more easier exam if you compare it with the last year's SNAP paper. So the difficulty level surely has come down. Therefore, the cutoffs will marginally go up. At the end of this session, I'm going to share with you the expected cutoffs for some of the Symbiosis business schools. Now, let's start looking at each of these sections one by one. So the first section we are going to start off with would be General English. And to take us through this particular section, I would like to invite my colleague, and he will take you through this section. So Anup sir, one of the senior faculty members here, will take you through the General English section of SNAP 2025. So Anup, over to you.
Hello, thank you. Well, as the name suggests, General English, it was pretty general. And yes, the focus was mostly on English. There were no critical reasoning questions, nothing that would actually make you sit and think. It was one of those sections, as Sir pointed out earlier, because you have latitude to move across sections depending on when you want to. This was one of those sections that you really need to get done with fast. 15 questions. If you're really good at your English, if you have great language skills, this should not be taking you more than 5 to 7 minutes. Most of the questions were point and shoot. If you know, you know. If you don't know, there's not much you can do about it. Most of the statements given, the questions were mostly fill in the blanks and required, funneling in the statements. There were single statements, so didn't require a lot of reading either. And even within that, there were basically very few complications in the sentences. Let's take a look, break it down. So we have 6 grammar-based questions. Again, most of them fill in the blanks. We had 1 passive active voice question and 1 question on parts of speech. Vocab was again about 4 of those questions were fill in the blanks. We saw 1 question which was based on etymology, and even that was not that complicated, and 1 question in parajumble. So parajumble, probably the easiest question of the paper was in the parajumble. So even though we did see a parajumble which would fall in the verbal ability category, it was not really that complicated at all. Idioms and proverbs could have been a bit of a tricky situation, which is why when we come to the attempts, I would say a great attempt would be 12, 13. A good attempt would be somewhere in the range of 10 to 12. You should be doing this, and you should be doing this relatively fast to get through the exam, and this would afford you more time in the other sections. So that's it for the English section. Thank you.
Thank you, Anup. Now, one thing you need to bear in mind about the general English section, students who have attended classes in time, if you gone through the basic concepts that were discussed in classes, then the general English section would have become extremely comfortable to deal with. All right. So thank you, Anup sir, for giving those inputs. Now let's move on to the next section. So the next section that we are going to talk about will be quantitative ability, data interpretation, and data sufficiency. Generally, in SNAP papers we have seen in the last few years, even though name of the section happens to have data interpretation and data sufficiency in it, but usually SNAP focuses on the quant part, mathematics part. So to help us understand what kind of a section was this in SNAP 2025, I would request my colleague Abhishek sir to take us through this section. So Abhishek sir, if you're there, you can take over the quant section.
Thank you, Asim sir. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. So this time in the SNAP, there was a big surprise in terms of quantitative ability section. So as Asim sir just now pointed out, for the past several years actually, DI and DS is not actually making any entry, all right, in the section. However, the surprise factor I was talking about was the overall easy nature of the questions. The questions were pretty direct. Now I see this is one of the queries that students are consistently asking: was the paper easy, was overall this section easy? So let me address that first. So the quantitative ability section, to start off with, as you can also see in the table in front of you, the questions were almost all the questions, all the areas that we covered were easy, and some of them were moderate. And it was hard to find any question that could be pointed out as a difficult question. Right? So let's quickly go through the topics that appeared this time in Quant, one after the other. So if you look at the list here, let's start off with geometry and mensuration. So there were 4 questions from geometry and mensuration. Just like the last year, geometry and mensuration is generally an important section as far as a SNAP test is concerned. So from geometry and mensuration, we had 1 question from mensuration, which was a very, very direct question. And the students reported that all the necessary information with respect to conversions were also given. For example, in the question, it was very clearly given 1 meter cube is how many liters, because the option choices were all in liters, they mentioned, right? So all the information was very, very direct. The question was very, very direct question, simple application of volume formula, all right? And there were a couple of questions from geometry, all right? One was very basic on finding area of triangle when sides are given. And there was one on trigonometry, all right? Trigonometry, or probably some basic algebra, we could also say. Now that was the geometry and mensuration. So overall level of difficulty, we could place it somewhere around mostly easy. There was some aspects of the question that could go into the moderate level. Then moving on to the next area that we had was permutation combination. Very, very direct question there also, and thus I'm putting it as easy. Probability, little long question. There were like 4 or 5 lines into which the question ran, but overall, once you understand it, not at all difficult to tackle that question. So I would call it as easy, and on account of length, probably moderate, right? If you missed it, right? Because as sir was saying, this is a time test, right? Not just concept test. Now here, whatever you do, you'll have to do it in 1 minute flat, right? That's the calculation. That's how it goes, right? As Anup sir was also pointing out, that VA, the language section could be done very easily, but quant, you need to spend some time, right? Because you need to read it, you need to calculate, do it accurately, because there is every chance you may go wrong. Profit and loss, there was a question which was slightly moderate on account of some calculations involved, right? Not so direct calculations. Simple interest, compound interest was very easy, not very easy, easy, direct question. Okay. Time and work, there were 2 questions, and the level of difficulty, one was pipes and system, one was a regular time and work question. Now, if you have solved our handouts, if you're a part of the course, you have solved our handouts, you would have found both the questions easy to manage, right? Not one, but both the questions easy to manage. Time and distance, it was a relatively easy question from trains and all, right? Equations, there were a couple of questions, one from quadratic and one was from simple equations. Simple equation was very, very direct, right? If you miss that somehow, right, because it was in some story format, some ages and all that, right? So then it was a really, really, what do we say, a badness. AMA, there was one very easy question, right? Questions which were directly modeled on our handout based questions, right? We have such questions in our handouts. Percentages, you had one question. Progressions, you had one. Now, percentage one was slightly lengthy, because I'm talking in comparison to the other questions that you had, right? The same question, had it appeared in CAT, let's say, then it would have been an easy question for sure. But here in SNAP, as compared to the other questions that we had, was slightly on the moderate side. Progressions was very direct question. It was about sum to end terms, right? There were a couple of questions from numbers. There was one question from logarithm, very direct. You could have simply substituted the option choices and get done with that, right? No need to solve it also. Venn diagrams. Venn diagrams, there was one easy to moderate level question, somewhat direct, we may say. So this is what we had if you look at the topic breakup and the number of questions coming from each topic. So overall, 20 questions were there. Can we move to the next slide, please? So overall, what we feel is, looking at the level of difficulty of this section, out of the 20 questions, as you can also see from the previous table, that there were many questions which were of easy category. And thus, we expect a student who was properly prepared could have attempted somewhere around 14 to 15 questions with good accuracy, right? Now, this will help you in overall pushing up your scores. And as Asim sir was mentioning already, there is no sectional cutoffs, right? It is only overall cutoff. So around 14 to 15 questions will definitely help you push up your overall score. All right. So that's what I have for you right now with respect to the quant section. I will be sticking around for any specific questions that you might be having. All of us would be glad to answer that. Right now, that's it from my end. Asim sir, over to you.
Thank you, Abhishek sir, for taking us through the quant part. I can see some of you have posted questions. Harshit is asking about expected cutoff. So Harshit, we are going to cover expected cutoffs after a few minutes. We are definitely going to give you an idea about what score in this exam probably would have been good enough to secure a call from SIBM Pune, SCMHRD. We are going to share that information after some time. And to everybody else, keep sharing your questions. I can see some of you have already done that. Keep doing that, because it's just a matter of few minutes, and then I'm going to take up all your queries along with Anup sir and Abhishek sir. We will answer all your questions. All right. So let's talk about the next section out here. The final section that we have in this exam was analytical and logical reasoning. This arguably is the most important section of SNAP question paper. The reason is pretty simple. While English had 15 questions, Quant had 20 questions. The highest number of questions, that is 25, appear from this section. So this section primarily can be a do or die kind of a section as far as your chances are concerned. And this year, if you were to compare the difficulty level of this section with last year's exam, I would say the difficulty level surely went down a notch. And one of the reasons for that was less number of questions from critical reasoning. Last year in SNAP paper, number of questions in critical reasoning were slightly on the higher side. This year, there were questions of critical reasoning, but the number of questions slightly came down, as well as the difficulty level of those questions also came down. Time students who have attended the classes and went through the concepts related to assumptions, conclusions, cause and effect, courses of action, they would have surely found these critical reasoning questions comfortable to deal with. Now, let's talk about kind of questions that have appeared. As you can see, it's a very long list. Usually SNAP, as Abhishek sir was also pointing out, that they spread out the questions across a lot of chapters. So was the case with analytical and logical reasoning section also. So to begin with, there were floor arrangement questions. In fact, there were a couple of floor arrangement questions in this particular exam. Now, floor arrangement is, in a way, it could be looked at as a kind of a vertical arrangement, linear arrangement kind of questions. But in this particular questions, the interesting angle that was brought in was distribution was also carried out. So that's what made these questions easy to moderate. It would have been a very simple question had it not involved the distribution angle. But because the distribution was also being carried out, it becomes easy to moderate kind of questions. Let me point out that there was one ambiguity in one of the questions of floor arrangement. So if students would have misunderstood the given information because of the ambiguity that was involved in that particular question, then it would have been a problem. Otherwise, both the questions, you can classify them as easy to moderate kind of questions. Courses of action, these questions, they were very much straightforward kind of questions, and anybody who had a little bit of an idea about how to deal with courses of action would surely have been able to deal with them very comfortably as such. In fact, there was one question which was also talking about ethical conduct, like what will be the ethical conduct in this particular scenario. And there was a scenario presented wherein a mobile phone was left by someone on a desk. And if you happen to find it, what should you do? What will be the ethical next step from your side? So it was very straightforward, simple kind of question. Verbal analogy questions, interestingly, were there. In fact, there were two verbal analogy questions that were available in this section. And these questions, they do require a person to have good vocabulary. Having said that, both the questions, the kind of words that they have picked up, they were not very difficult. That's the reason I mentioned them as easy. So as long as your vocabulary is decent, if you are somebody who has been reading a newspapers on a regular basis and you have been working on your vocabulary, then you would have found them very easy. But having said that, if your English vocabulary is on the weaker side, then probably instead of easy, that question for you would have become a difficult one. So that is something to keep in mind. Number series, there were two questions and both of them were a relatively easy question. Having said that, one of those questions, it involved the logic of multiplication and addition at the same time. So probably some people with that particular question may have struggled, considering that the duration of time would be on the lower side. Otherwise, it's an easy question. Linear arrangement, there were two questions. Again, in those linear arrangement questions, students have reported that one question of linear arrangement had two arrangements that were possible. So possibly an error could have been there in one of the questions of linear arrangement. But SNAP authorities have clearly said that in case there are errors, they are going to look into it and take some action. Having said that, this is on the basis of the feedback that we have got from the students. So it remains to be seen. They will look into it. In case they find it genuine kind of an issue, then they'll probably take some kind of an action. But students have reported that one question of linear arrangement had ambiguity because there were two different arrangements that were possible considering the inputs that the examiner had given. Coding and decoding, again, two questions were there and they were relatively easy kind of questions. They were sentence coding based questions, right? So very comfortable to deal with. Strong and weakening an argument, strengthening and weakening an argument, one question was there. Probably this was the one question in critical reasoning which can be classified as of moderate difficulty level. And again, the reason it becomes moderate is because the student has to have good amount of conceptual clarity about how to deal with such questions. Then binary logic, one question was there, which was pretty straightforward. As long as you know how to deal with binary logic questions, if you have clarity about what is truth teller, what kind of statement truth teller can make, what kind of statement truth teller cannot make, as long as you have that kind of clarity, then it becomes a very simple question to deal with. Calendars, there were two questions, and both of them were very straightforward. According to the feedback that we got from the student, one of the question was, they gave you two dates and they said that first date is this day, what is the next date? So very, very basic level calendars question. The other one, of course, needed a little more conceptual clarity, where a single date was given. A Republic Day date was given apparently, and they wanted to know which day of the week it was. So again, if you are someone who have attended classes at time and you have attended the LR section classes carefully, then it would have become a very simple question for you, because we have taught similar kind of questions in our classes. Now, as far as number series and letter series questions are concerned, there were two of them and they were pretty straightforward and easy. As long as you are very comfortable with squares, or as long as you are comfortable with the place values concept, it becomes a very simple questions. Again, critical reasoning questions, assumptions and cause and effect, there was one question each and they were of moderate difficulty level. There was one question based on logical deductions, and people who knew how to deal with them, if you knew how to draw a Venn diagram and solve it, they would have found it pretty moderate difficulty level. The reason I'm highlighting the word, I'm classifying it as moderate difficulty level, is because they use the term only a few in one of the premises. So if you know how to interpret only a few, then it would have become a very straightforward question for you. Otherwise, we can classify it as moderate difficulty level. Then we have situation analysis, one question, which was pretty simple, straightforward. Blood relations question was there, which was easy. But then students have reported that in this particular question, students have said that they had to assume that Suresh is male, then they were able to get the answer. If you don't assume Suresh, then the character that was given in the question as male, then probably you would have got a little ambiguity out there as such. So again, we are going to classify it as a simple question. Clocks, there was one question which is easy, as long as you know what is reflex angle. If you are aware of the concept of reflex angle, it becomes a very straightforward, very simple kind of a question. So overall, I want to reiterate, the difficulty level of LR, logical reasoning section, has come down compared to last year. And as a result of this, the good number of attempts that we can say, our good number of attempts would be 22 to 24. Yes, this was one section which was highly scoreable because the difficulty level came down. So 22 to 24 attempts can be considered as good number of attempts. Having said that, even if you were somebody who attempted 18 to 20 or 18 to 22, anything in middle, again, that is also an acceptable number. But if you are very ambitious, you're looking at very high percentile, then probably 22 to 24 number of attempts are advisable for you as such. Now, let's move on to the last part of the discussion, which is what would be the expected cutoffs, because I can see a lot of you have sent us questions asking us about it. So let me disclose our analysis. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to share with you the final marks. So far, we were talking in terms of number of attempts, but now I'm going to talk in terms of marks, because students, they request us to speak in terms of marks. So these are the expected cutoffs for this year. So we expect that the cutoff for SIBM Pune flagship MBA program, it would actually go up. We expect the cutoff to be around 45 to 47 marks overall. This is the net score that you should be getting after you deduct your negative marks. And for SCMHRD, we expect it to be marginally lower at 44 to 46 marks. Now, keep in mind that these predictions are for general category applicants. For people who belong to SC, ST, differently abled or Kashmiri migrants category, then the cutoffs will be much, much lower than this. These are for general category applicants as such. So this is what we have predicted as such in terms of cutoffs. All right. Now, let me take up your questions. I'm sure you have got queries, and let me answer your questions. If you have a question, if you haven't sent it so far, please go ahead and do that, and we will try to answer it. Now, the first question that I can see out here Rudraksh has asked me, are you going to discuss the questions as well? Not really. In this sessions, we are not going to disclose the questions. We are not going to discuss the question. Whatever analysis we have shared in this session, that is only on the basis of the interaction we had with numerous T.I.M.E students from across India. And after collating their inputs, we have created this. We are not going to discuss and disclose the questions in this particular session now. Harshit had asked me, please comment on the expected cutoffs. So I've already done that, Harshit. I hope you got your answer. If there is any specific business school that you had in mind, you can let me know. Shrinik says, I got 18 marks, sir. All right, 18 marks. You didn't mention your reservation category. That would have also helped me in making a comment on this. But even if you're a general category, if you are applied to some of the symbiosis group of business schools like SIBM, let's say Noida campus or SSSS, for instance, or SIMC, for instance, you still would definitely get a call, ma. So again, if you mention your reservation category, it will be easier for me to respond to that. Razor says, I remember there was some ambiguity in the conditions given. Was there only one? I think there are two. Absolutely correct. That's what I have also said in my session, that there were a couple of questions where ambiguity was there. In fact, there is a linear arrangement question that I mentioned where you could generate two different arrangements satisfying all the conditions given by the examiner according to our students. So yes, there was more than one Razor. You are absolutely correct. That's the feedback we also received. Manu Rajiv says, what would probably be the cutoff for SIBM Bangalore this time? So SIBM Bangalore usually has a cutoff lower than the two business schools that I have mentioned in the previous slide. So considering that, we can safely assume SIBM Bangalore to have a cutoff for general category somewhere around 38 marks. So 37 to 39, that can be the range of cutoff for SIBM Bangalore for their flagship program for general category. Again, remember, they have multiple programs. For each of the programs, the cutoff may vary. Here, I'm only talking about the flagship regular MBA program. Aryan says, I attempted 56, sir. What can I expect? Well, Aryan, again, accuracy plays a major role, ma. So if your accuracy was absolutely fabulous, for example, if you are someone who gets 90% accuracy, for instance, then my friend, you are absolutely safe. You will surely get calls from all the business schools under Symbiosis. And from the team out here, I wish you all the best. Razor says, sir, I have attempted only LR and QA. I have skipped English except one question. I'm sure all the questions, can I expect a call? Again, Razor, it helps if you can mention your exact number of questions attempted as well as reservation category. That would help us in giving a response. So Vishwa Patel had also asked me SIBM Bangalore cutoff. I think we have already discussed that. I think you got the answer for that. Ambivert Dude says, is there sectional cutoff for SIBM Pune? Usually, Symbiosis group of business schools do not have provision for sectional cutoffs. And same is the case with SIBM Pune also. Mini Vlog says, sir, I have 77.6. Am I eligible for... I have 7.76 profile. Okay, when you say profile, I'm assuming you mean to say your graduation percentage maybe. Am I eligible for SIBM Pune and SCMHRD? See, as far as the selection process is concerned, the beauty about Symbiosis group of business schools is profile doesn't play any role. Absolutely right. You must be surprised when I say that. Unlike IIMs, as far as the Symbiosis group of colleges are concerned, profile doesn't play any role as far as the weightages are concerned. So as long as you've done a fabulous job in SNAP, they will invite you for interview. They are not going to look at any other criteria. SNAP overall performance is the only criteria of getting an interview call. Manan Mehta says SCIT cutoffs. So SCIT usually will have much lower cutoffs than the business schools that we have discussed. For general category, it can go lower than 30 marks. So it can be somewhere around 25 marks or so in terms of cutoffs. So much lower cutoffs you can expect for SCIT flagship program, going by the past trend as such. Lower cutoffs, much lower cutoffs for general category as well as the remaining categories as well. So I have run out of questions. Anything else that you wanted to ask before you wrap up? All right. Abhishek sir, anything that you want to add, sir, before we wrap up for the day?
No, sir. You have
All
covered
right.
pretty much everything in detail. So nothing particularly from my end, unless there is some question pertaining to QA.
No, we won't have any question pertaining to sections per se, sir. All right. So fair enough. So I guess with this, we have come to the end of this session. And on behalf of Anup sir, as well as Abhishek sir, I wish you all the very best. And I do hope that you people will work hard for the remaining entrance exams also. And do make sure that you also prepare for upcoming GWPI rounds. So on behalf of the entire team, I wish you all the best and see you in the next session.
Thank you and all the very best.
Okay. Thank you.